We kick off this evening with Hannah Williams.
What is a ritual? Is this doing it? Okay. I repeat. What is a ritual? I'd like for you all to think about that and then listen. Anthropologists have historically deemed ritual as any activity that is perceived as non-rational, or any activity in which the means seem disproportionate to the ends. Nowadays, the popular understanding of ritual has shifted from non-rational to ineffective. In regards to ritual healing, it is widely accepted that its efficacy is only made possible through the placebo effect, which is any kind of healing that cannot be understood by the doctor. But placebo is just a wastebasket category, a place to throw away and ignore embarrassing phenomena. Instead, it could be an explanatory category for gaining greater insight. But this is unlikely to happen because the medical field, the largest and most obvious critic of ritual healing, takes issue with the practice. But what needs to be understood is that most critique of ritual healing is firmly associated with the discourse of modernity, founded in Cartesian dualism. Ritual efficacy is antithetical to modern existence exactly because it operates outside of the accepted boundaries of science, the boundaries of post-enlightenment. I legitimately feel haunted by what we may have lost through creating these boundaries, but I also wonder what we might be able to remember. The mysterious efficacy of ritual healing is not the embarrassment. The true embarrassment is this. What the doctor sees as placebo is just something that they are too small-minded to understand. The inability to understand something does not vilify its truth. I'm bothered by the scholarship on ritual because the truth is, the shift in language from ritual as non-rational to ineffective continues to impose the same ontological superiority of anthropologists over and against other. The use of more gentle language changes nothing. It just puts lipstick on a pig. 2 weeks ago, 43 pages into my thesis, I decided to start over. This was prompted by an intrusive thought I had upon waking in the morning. I will never find what I'm looking for in the places I am searching. It's been almost a year of barreling through academic literature on the study of ritual, my goal to address the curious efficacy of a practice known as biodynamic agriculture. I have read dozens of books, dissertations, theories, definitions, each peppered with slights on some academics and congratulations to others. Each individual in the pursuit of trying to figure it out, as if ritual, is somehow more complicated than just asking a practitioner whether or not they think it works. And I'm wondering why a yes in response is not adequate proof. Every time I would read a ritual studies article, deep down, I was searching for an academic to admit that rituals actually do something, that rituals have efficacy. But I realize now that I was looking for evidence of ritual efficacy within the same institution that has historically filed it away with the non-rational. This is a problem and has become the focus of my work. Ritual efficacy does not exist in the larger narrative of academia. I was looking for a live pig at the butcher's counter, for a tree in a pile of leaves, for gloves from a cobbler. I went into this project with the naive belief in the promises of academia. I was grasping for confirmation from some kind of entity that might pat me on the head and say, yes, we see you down there, and what you have experienced has been real. My experience of ritual power and the experiences of many, many others has been categorically rendered invisible. I may feel disappointed, but I should not feel let down, because this confirmatory entity is not designed for our propping up. The institution is constructed with the ghosts of our experiences, studied now under microscope, pathologizing not only ritual, but any experience of the numinous. Academics scratch their heads in their offices over what is known as the problem of ritual efficacy. We can no longer afford to allow anything to be free of epistemological considerations, because maybe the real problem is that there is a problem with assumed ritual inefficacy. It has been through my academic study of ritual that I have realized that my subjectivity is the problem. It is the thought form around assumed ritual inefficacy that prevents practices such as biodynamic agriculture from flourishing in a meaningful way. Trapping the regenerative potential of this farming method, not only amongst pseudoscientists and snake oil salesmen, but also with the legitimate values and beliefs of many indigenous and earth-based peoples. Ritual research must be made contemporary in a way that honors not only its use, but also the history of its denigration and the subjugation of its performer. My new project has been an attempt to address how ritual can be more appropriately researched. To begin, research should never be employed as a method towards denying the validity of a tradition, worldview, or way of life. That, in our cultural moment, one of uncertainty, in which we are reckoning with the consequences of our actions, is completely inappropriate. When the climate scientists warn of catastrophe by 2040, that is a call for us to reckon with how we got here, from a fundamental but contrived disconnection, from the ghost in the machine. If René Descartes were resurrected from the grave at this moment in history, I wonder how he would react to this news. While he is not entirely to blame for our predicament, he acted as an indisputable player in a pantheon of other thinkers hell-bent on rationalizing not only the domination of man over nature, but man over other. Support for the separation of mind and body fueled the supremacy of the West over the rest, the thought form acting as a volatile kindling for an already long history of violence and conquest. Ecological destruction is the wrathful spirit of this way of thinking. And I imagine that if Descartes were to stand with us now, he would be tormented by the unexpected apparition of his own creation. If there is a ghost in the machine, it is certainly haunting us now. If we are to revision how ritual should be researched, we must begin by questioning its foundations. Whose interest does the research of ritual serve? And who will benefit from this research? What are the goals of the research? And which inception of mankind is the researcher looking to aid? Should the researcher even consider their informant as somebody in need of help? And if the informant needs help from their use of ceremony, it is time for the researcher to go back from whence they came. Every time we pathologize the actions of an indigenous, earth-based, or otherwise spiritual individual, we are perpetuating epistemic violence. Anthropological ideas of liminality and communitas can offer valuable language to describe ritual transformation. Frameworks for rites of passage can give words to experiences that are experienced by many. However, if these terms are used to ultimately reduce ritual to a psychological response to grief, political struggle, or general uncertainty, we effectively limit the boundaries of ritual power. This way of thinking unjustly transforms experiences into artifacts, creating taxonomies of experience that reduce human actions to mindless responses to external stimuli. What if ritual was not a pathology, but an entity deserving renaming? A distinct element of reality that responds to repetition, tradition, and style. An entity disinterested in specifics, responding to thoughtful intention, not as Godhead, but as mediator. This rethinking of ritual asks how language can restrain our deeper understanding, because our terms reflect our problems. To call something a ritual may be indicative of a wider culture that is not permeated by it. So what's up with this situation? Biodynamic agriculture is a sustainable farming method developed by Rudolf Steiner in the early 20th century. The practice is holistic and prioritizes soil health, self-containment, and biodiversity. However, the practice diverges from the larger food movement due to its mystical dimension. Biodynamics uniquely emphasizes the importance of individual spiritual development and functions within a distinct cosmology that in many ways acts as an explaining story for the rituals, the preparations that are performed on the farm. Biodynamics became the focus of my ritual study because my experience of it catalyzed a reverence for alternative ways of knowing. But it must be addressed that the movement itself is undeniably white. Further, I speak from the privileged position of a white, cisgendered woman, and I could not continue without naming that. As such, I would like to make a call to all biodynamic practitioners. The efficacy of biodynamics is not an isolated event. Instead of viewing it as a novel yet anomalous concept devised by Rudolf Steiner, we could revision biodynamics as a European renewal of earth-based wisdom that mirrors and advocates for the worldviews of indigenous cultures. Throughout Steiner's agriculture lectures, he praises the wisdom of peasants, people that can be seen as the earth-based peoples of Europe. And he condemns the marginalization of peasants as unintelligent during his time. Steiner was an advocate for older ways of being, and this aspect of his work is often overlooked. As a young man, he desired to write a peasant's philosophy, a portrait of older ways, possibly manifesting as an intimate ethnography that voiced the sacred stories of place in 19th century Austria. But Steiner grieved that such a philosophy could no longer be written. Giving his agriculture lectures in 1924, the folk lifestyles of his youth were already going extinct. Again, I feel haunted. What have we lost? For Steiner, the agriculture course acted as a starting point for the integration of peasant wisdom and science, a synthesis of the mythic and the scientific. In fact, this was one of the original goals. His lectures were a reaction to the materialist view of the earth that became prominent during his lifetime, this view stemming in part from the reductionist theories of Descartes, Francis Bacon, and their ghastly contemporaries. I imagine that if Steiner were to stand with us today, he would be pleased with the countless biodynamic practitioners who have tirelessly tested his theories for almost 100 years. Steiner was an advocate for older ways of being, and his moment was one wary of industrialization. So, allow me to get to the point. My goal when studying ritual in biodynamic agriculture is to disrupt paradigmatic views of the earth that have caused measurable harm to humans and non-humans alike. Specifically, views that, since their inception, have inflicted unjustifiable damage onto indigenous cultures across the planet. While this is true that the systematic erasing of earth-based peoples began in Europe with Christian conquest and post-Enlightenment thinking, in no way do I want to suggest that the demise of the peasants should be conflated with the ongoing and violent threats faced by indigenous groups today. That's important. However, both are victims of the same violent worldview, which is truly threatened by people who are connected deeply to the earth. The efficacy of both ritual and biodynamics have significant ontological implications, threatening the fundamental framework of the business-as-usual understanding of the phenomenal world. Illuminating the foundations of our worldviews can allow for us to reimagine how research should be performed. Indeed, there is much more to understand about the human condition, and alternative views can absolutely fill in the gaps. However, we can only assimilate these views if we allow ourselves to fully listen and grant long overdue validity to the perspectives of others, ritual practitioners included. Because ritual study is only justified if it is interested in furthering the rights of all peoples to self-determination. My new thesis work has been driven by a desire to give consideration to the valid experiences of ritual practitioners, my 21st century attempt at a peasant's philosophy. But I'm concerned not only with the integration of subjectivity and objectivity, but also with the importance of furthering indigenous cultural futures. Incredible healing emerges from the awareness that traditional knowledge is not just local knowledge, but knowledge of the universal as expressed in the local. The worldwide encroachment of the Western ontology has the potential to sanitize the diversity of human thought that arose in reflection to local environments. Traditional rituals and ceremonies can be codifiers of regional knowledge. The infinite can be courted in the finite, and the universal always impoverishes the particular. If life responds to ritual, it certainly does not respond to a scarcity mindset. Biodynamics is not just the power of belief in action, but also the power of worldview in action. And worldview must be scrutinized at our cultural moment. As we become more and more haunted by the ghosts of our actions, a path of reckoning can be forged through the reconsideration of our core beliefs about the earth, our bodies, and the foundations of reality. Colonial thinking reduces not only plants and animals to their parts, but also people. If science is about discovery, spirituality is about remembrance. And I speak with respect for the wisdom of objectivity, but also with criticism of its limitations. Science has decided what reality is at the expense of human experience, but ritual has the potential to allow us to remember all that we have lost. What if we paid more attention to the results of a claim rather than the specifics of a claim? If a worldview that allows room for the numinous results in a sustainable agriculture practice, then so be it. If a worldview that acknowledges the power of human thought results in mindfulness, then so be it. And if a worldview regards ritual action as an effective technology, then so be it. An overculture uncomfortable with disturbance is unlikely to bridge the gap between subjectivity and objectivity. In the study of consciousness, quantum mechanics has the potential to rock the foundations of physics to its core. Without a doubt, there are certain ideas that have the ability to disrupt accepted natural law. However, a change in natural law only makes the scientist uncomfortable, insofar as they must reconcile all future experiments under new conditions of reality. It does not necessarily force the scientist to contend with a long history of cultural genocide, scientific racism, categorical disembodiment, and epistemic violence. That is what ritual efficacy does. The truth is, widespread acknowledgement of indigenous worldviews would require an apology. The institutions that have historically denigrated them would have to apologize for a 500-year history of brutal subjugation. This is the disruptive nature of ritual efficacy. It has the power to shatter colonial establishments and ontologies. But ritual efficacy must result in apology. It must result in we are so sorry. We are so, so sorry. Long overdue, but at least it would turn the gaslight off. Anyone have any questions?
Is that real wine?
It's non-alcoholic. I'm just going to sit here until somebody has a question. Or not. Oh yeah, so, well, now that's my illustration that I did actually. But all of the pictures were from a biodynamic preparation making class that I went to up in Carbondale. And basically, I mean, this could take an hour just talking about this, but it was a class held so that you could make all of the, I would call them processed herbs, that you use on the farm homeopathically for literal reasons, but also for metaphorical reasons. And so the pictures of like the skulls and the flowers and the sausages, those are all, it's just imagery of the way that the preparations are created. Yeah. I thought it would be interesting to have like some imagery about what the thing that I'm like tangentially talking about. You know? Yes.
My sense is that biodynamic farming tends to have greater yields and higher quality results. And I understand that you're not at all about just limiting it to the results-based thing, but I wonder if you could say a little bit about that. These my permie friends, so they didn't really understand why, but rather than just doing organically, somehow when they did it biodynamically, they got much better results. Is that, did you research into that?
Yes, I have research into that. I mean, I've been studying biodynamics for like 7 years, and it all started with just like my own experience studying it and then practicing it and all these things. And I feel like the thing about biodynamics is that there are all these different ways to explain it. So you could do like a materialist explanation, which could be like, okay, so the horn manure, which is a horn, I think there were some pictures of that, full of cow poop. That works because it creates fungal networks in the soil from the decomposition. It's like, okay, great, you figured it out. But then it's, but then there's there's these other, there's this, the thing that I feel like is missed, which I feel like it's missed when looking at any tradition from the outside, is that these things function within cosmologies, so like explaining stories. And so the horn itself functions within a worldview that believes that there are entities roaming around the farm and consciousness streams down from the heavens into the farmer and all these things. And so it just kind of, I feel like there's so many elements to it, and in my paper I write a lot more about how I'm not just trying to reduce biodynamics to ritual either, but it's like a pillar within it. And I think ultimately, one of the greatest pillars of biodynamics is that it calls on people to just pay more attention to what they're doing. And I think that usually when people pay more careful attention to anything, they have better results. Did that answer your question at all? It's just like, it's like this thing about like, it's like people do biodynamics and they're like, wow, I had incredible yields and I don't understand why. It might be one of those things that we will never understand because we're harnessing like entities, kind of like what I was saying, that might respond to us. And maybe like rituals themselves, I mean, one of my personal theories is that ritual is a language that we speak to the divine through our actions. Because a theme that I noticed through all of the the traditional ritual study is that ritual is an embodied practice, so it has to be performed through the body. You can't like have anything but a human being doing a ritual. And so it's about kind of like using our bodies as conduits to have deeper relationships to the earth, and it's important to remember that this is functioning within a cosmology. So it's not necessarily the same cosmology as materialist science. So it's kind of funny when people try to study it through that lens because they're only going to get to such a conclusion. But anyway, that's all I got for that. Anyone else? Noelle?
So, in the breaking off of science and pre-science ideology that you see, isn't it possible if there's a truth in that, that we could end up doing this?
I love that. Did everybody see what she just did? She went like, okay, breaking off. Like, okay, here's like, I don't know, let's pretend it's like two things, so like subjectivity and objectivity. She was like, we're gonna get there someday. I hope so, we better. We're kind of screwed, so. We got a big mess to clean up, y'all.
Do you have thoughts about that? Like, as far as...
I think that, well, I do have thoughts about that, and I think, do you mean like,
So there's the pre, if we go back 500 years, or I would say 3,000 years, the Romans were great at wiping out all that stuff. So
true.
if we go back to like ancient wisdom, my personal belief is that it's still there in our DNA, really. That we might, through all of our perhaps beginning in a way that's misguided, but in our greater understanding through science, discover that truth again. But I also see that rather than completely abandoning ritual, the dominant culture does just kind of dominate ritual through its own religious ideas and its own kind of co-opt of a lot of those ancient practices, kind of picking and choosing maybe.
Yeah.
That's where things get lost, right?
Yeah.
Picking and choosing. But if it's the truth, we can't lose the truth. I guess is what I mean.
Yeah. Are you talking about how like rituals can also get like crystallized and maybe like lose some sort of thing?
Sure.
Which I totally agree with.
Well, there's the going through the motions. There's the embodiment and intention.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's going through the motions and the feeling and all that.
Yeah. I had a response to that, and then it flew out of the room.
It won't be lost.
Dang it. Was there anyone else? Maybe we'll come back. Yes?
Yeah, what were you stirring?
Oh, yes. So this is something that's called barrel prep. Oop, there it goes. And It is kind of like, it's something that is buried underground. So ideally you have like a bunch of panels of wood. You like create an underground barrel. And so you fill that with manure and you stuff it with different herbs. So it says on the lid, but I'm pretty sure it's chamomile, valerian, dandelion. I don't think oak bark goes in that one, but it might. Yarrow, things like that. And each of those herbs serves their own purpose. And you let it sit there, I think it's for 6 months, but it might also be a year. And then you take it out once it smells fantastic, if anyone wants a whiff. It smells really good. And once it starts smelling, like when you smell it, you're like, yeah, it's ready. And you use it almost like rescue remedy. Do you know what that is? It's like the rescue remedy of the farm. It's just like it's like an immunity booster. So that it's like the cure-all, sort of. So that's what that is used for. And it's what I had available.
So, were you infusing your thesis also into the mix?
Yes. I was. Noelle, I just remembered what I was going to say to you. I was going to say that, so in getting to this point where we bridge the gap, one of the points that I make in my paper is that kind of like in trying to close the gap, we need to hear people out, like, and hear what their experiences are and trust their experiences, because sometimes our culture, it gaslights people out of believing what they actually feel. And that can be really traumatic. And so I think that in bridging the gap, we need to listen to marginalized voices specifically. And I think that it's marginalized peoples who will be bridging the gap through their knowledge that we've overlooked for so long. But it will be them who decides when the bridge has been gapped. It's not, the dominant thing isn't going to decide that, because that could in itself be another form of colonizing knowledge, which is a form of epistemic violence. But, does anyone, hello, hi.
What's with the hat and where are you going to spray that?
Okay, so I don't know where I'm going to spray it. I haven't gotten that far. And the hat, I mean, this is my personality. This is like, I'm a garden gnome. I'm a gnome. That's one of the entities, the biodynamic entities around the farm are gnomes, sylphs, salamanders. You know. What is the other one? I'm missing that. Anyway, I'm one of the biodynamic entities. I don't know what we're doing for time. We could probably call it. Unless anyone else has something.
Are you going to start practicing it in your work?
Yeah, I have a landscaping business, so next year I've committed to using it more on the landscape level, which I haven't done in the past, because I don't really want to talk to my clients about that. But now I'm like, whatever. Let's do it. So anyway, thank you guys. Thank you.